I'm Emily Buca, and I'm with the Northside Industrial Development Company. We are the recipients of, well, now it's about over $5 million in EPA community-wide brownfield assessment funds. By we, I mean not just Northside Industrial Development Company, also known as Riverside Center for Innovation, but also stakeholders, McKees Rocks Community Development Corporation, Stowe Township, Neville Township, and McKees Rocks. We brought those resources to the P&LE site because it was part of an enterprise zone that we had created. And there are benefits that accrue to companies that expand or locate within the zone. Lower interest rate on state financing, but in this case, the one big benefit was because it was an enterprise zone, which by nature is a distressed area, it is a special industrial area, which means the level of remediation or the standards for remediation are less than if it had been for daycare or residential or schools.
It's been incredibly challenging, and several false starts, and more twists and turns than we can get into here. I'm the executive director of McKees Rocks Community Development Corporation, and our role as the CDC representing McKees Rocks and Stowe Township is to primarily focus on the economic revitalization of our community, primarily focused on industrial and commercial development, but also to quarterback a larger comprehensive community development strategy.
We learned, and it was quite obvious, and I'm sure those of you who are involved in brownfield development would appreciate this, no one was going to pay any attention to this site until the environmental issues were resolved.
You can't market a site to a private developer while you have this big question mark. No one knows what's in the ground. So really, we cannot get much more than fleeting interest in the site until we solve that question mark.
There were many efforts not only to assess it, DEP has a whole file cabinet on this site.
The site history it goes back into the 1980s. I got involved with it, and a DEP coworker and I were responding to some odors and contamination that was found in a sewer system down in the P&LE railroad yard. My name is Mike Pavlonis, and I'm a licensed professional geologist. I work in the Act 2 program, a brownfields program, where I review the technical reports that are submitted for that program. And as a result of numerous discussions and meetings, we've requested that they do phase 1, a phase 2 investigation. As a result of that, like I said, we had numerous meetings. There was, based on our investigation and look over the property, we found other areas that looked like they were causing potential contamination. Based on those discussions, we were trying to get them to do something, and they didn't have the money to do it at the time. They went bankrupt. I think it was in 1997 that they ended up eventually going bankrupt. But the department in 1995 issued an order for them to do an investigation. Like I said, this was prior to Act 2, and we didn't really have any ongoing standards for the soils at the site. And then in 1995, Act 2 got passed, and they did some minor investigations. It was kind of sporadic, just to try to keep us at bay and enforcing, the order. And then when they went into bankruptcy, it really there was nobody there to fund any of the investigations and conduct, any studies to see what the extent of contamination was. So it was a pretty frustrating time for the department, and I think during the period of the 1990s, I kind of classify that as a period of litigation and discussions with the department over how to try to get this area that appeared, there's other sites on there that appeared to be fairly heavily contaminated. So the department kept on trying to pursue that, but with a bankrupt firm, it was pretty hard. We really didn't have any place to go.
And the DEP has been as you know, a fantastic partner, very pro-development minded, very much wanting to be a partner and seeing kind of the same end goal that we did of what this site can be. It was literally a catalyst to moving the development of the site forward. There's no doubt about it. Perhaps the greatest catalyst was getting the phase 1 and phase 2, more importantly, studies done to help us understand that okay, the environmental issues here are not as bad as we thought.
As often is the case, as I'm sure those of you who are in the field, once again, it was the threat of contamination as opposed to actual contamination. In the end, we spent almost $800,000 on this 100-acre site. At one point, we had 80 wells. I mean, it was really quite a production. And the results that came back was indeed there was some hot spots, but nowhere near what had been keeping developers away.
In my mind, I had some thoughts about where I thought the contamination would be, and it was kind of surprising to me. Areas where I thought may be heavily contaminated really weren't.
We can understand them in a very specific way, and we know how to address them. And again, working with partners like the EPA and especially the DEP through the Act 2 process really is what has made this site attractive and what has enabled development to begin there.
The other thing that we were able to do, those few hotspots that we mentioned, we used engineering controls, or we didn't, but the developer used engineering controls to resolve those issues. Several roads, concrete roads, and the contamination is buried deep beneath those roads. The SIA went a long way in order to being able to achieve that for this site. The reason that the site, now that the environmental hurdle has been resolved, is so compelling is that it is within spitting distance of the Golden Triangle of the city of Pittsburgh.
It's that close. It's flat. It has great road access. There is even river and barge access through adjacent facility in McKees Rocks Industrial Enterprises. It's why that site was so strategic 100 years ago, and it still is today. We're very close. Having committed private interests for the entirety of the site is very exciting. I think now the challenge is going to be to continue to work with those private interests to see that ultimately what goes in the ground is the best fit for the community.
We were lucky and thrilled to acquire a private developer, Trinity Development, who has plans for light industrial and some other uses. And then, more recently, the CSX Railroad has announced the creation of the building of an intermodal transportation network.
When you look at something like the CSX intermodal facility, very clearly there's a huge regional benefit. It's considered one of the big regional wins for 2014 by the Allegheny Conference. So it's making a big impact there. And again, the challenge is on us to make sure that impact is best delivered here in the community.
And looking back from the start of the 1980s, I would have never envisioned it really to kind of go full circle like this. But I think that it's good to see, because if it wasn't really for the grants that were given for the investigation of the property, I still think it may not. It'd still be sitting there. This seems to come around full circle, and then now it was a former railroad, and it's going back to its former use. For a portion of it is. It'll be nice. I travel that way frequently, and someday I'll be driving by and say, it'll be nice to know that I was part of that effort there.
It's typically said that these brownfield developments really do require a full team effort from just a vast array of partners to make it happen. And unfortunately, time.
As far as what we learned with the P&LE site, I have a set of memo pads that I use for this when we deal with this. It's at the top it says, it always costs more and it always takes longer. So get yourself some of those pads, notepads, because that's what you'll need to be sending out.